What's going on? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content like what you're watching right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Capt Nostalgia. I am a writer, podcaster, and the director of our film festival called Horrific Hope. If you guys would like more information on more about what we do, more podcasts, more movie reviews like this, and most importantly, links to, our mental health resource library. Check the links in the descriptions below. Now, we'll say this video that you're about to see is long overdue. This was supposed to be done last month, and I apologize to our friends over at Dark Star Pictures for taking this so long. Experienced some problems with local post offices here, and then I got sick, and so here I am. I deeply apologize. I apologize to all of you watching because I know that you guys, I love interacting here with you guys on IGTV as well as YouTube, and I love talking movies with you guys, and I really hope that this is a little bit of a departure, but I hope you guys will stay with me. So I was born in 1991, and I claim that I'm a 90s baby through and through, and there are a lot of blind spots when it comes to the 90s that I don't ever get to see. And sometimes movies that either flew under the radar, were box office bombs, or were made in other countries, sometimes are getting slowly brought to my attention, including the one that we're talking about today. We're talking about Dingo today. This movie is an Australian movie from 1991, and I do believe this is the first time that it's ever been on physical media for pickup in the United States. If you guys are interested in checking this movie out, I will provide a link in the descriptions below where you guys can pick up your copy. This is now out. This is not an ordinarily we will do advanced releases, but this, because of just the things I described in the beginning of this video, this is the reason why this review is coming so late. But before I jump into the movie, I'm actually going to talk about the specs, because you guys can also get this on digital and check it out as well. So let's jump into talk about the specs of whether or not this is worth your money coming on into your collection if you're a physical media collector. As I said before, this was a first time viewing for me, so I have no connection whatsoever to this movie. I will say though, typically when older films are being restored into physical media for the first time, there is a remastering process that is being done. Just a couple of movies that I pulled from my collection just to emphasize this point. The Steelbook collection of Universal Monsters. These look absolutely incredible. Hitchcock's Psycho looks absolutely stunning on Blu-ray remastered. 47's Nightmare Alley, this looks crisp. The black and white really pop. Also, for the first time on Blu-ray, also Twin Peaks, the original 2 seasons of this series just look absolutely stunning in their remaster here on Blu-ray. You come over to Dingo, this movie looks like it has the same exact quality of a mid to late 90s DVD release. And I'm not really too keen on the transfer. As I said, I have a few movies that were released in the 90s and or early 2000s on Blu-ray. I recently watched Shrek, and Shrek looks absolutely gorgeous on Blu-ray. The colors really pop. The animation just really feels lively. You know, Dingo is a live action movie. You don't get that same effect and feel here. This feels like a late 2000s, a late 90s, early 2000s DVD release that just never, for whatever reason, never made it out of that era, and it feels very much of that era. I was not too much on the transfer of this. The picture quality is really grainy and really holds a lot of that early 90s feel to it. Of the special features on the DVD, this is really bare bones, and I want to emphasize this. This is the only way this comes in physical media. It is only available on DVD. There is only a few featurettes with the director, Rolf de Heer. And then there's also an audio commentary with the director as well. And I don't know, this was one of the last things that Miles Davis ever worked on, and this feels like a missed opportunity not to have a special feature dissecting or jumping into his legacy, how jazz is influenced, how he influenced the genre of jazz, but also at the same time, specifically looking at like jazz in Australia and like how other countries view the media. I don't know. This movie is really, as far as a physical media release, this is really bare bones, the quality standard. So I'm actually going to give this, when we're talking in terms of just specs and featurettes, I'm actually going to say that this is actually on the lower scale and only give this actually a 1 out of 5. But let's talk about the movie. The movie tells the story of John, who, when he was younger, saw this really famous blues musician, played Billy Cross, played by the late, great Miles Davis, and the DVD does confirm it. This is actually his last appearance on screen. And from this random encounter, essentially, John makes it his life goal to be a famous jazz musician, living up to the status and legacy of Billy Cross. And so, well, it's a story about a man who essentially throws everything that he has, sacrificing his family, his job, his home, all in the process to pursue the dream of jazz. This movie is really inspiring because I really love a good inspirational movie, and this movie is definitely inspirational. This movie is a little bit of a slow burn, and I will say probably the first half of this movie is just kind of set up with all the characters and the slow burn, and it does drag. That's one of the things that I will say this movie does really drag. It explores the scenery around John really well and sets it up there, but I will say this movie, it sets up like weird subplots that do eventually end up, I won't even say paying off, because there's no need for them by the time that the final resolution comes. There's really weird decisions for probably the first act and a half of this movie, and that's kind of what holds me back from loving this a little bit more. I'm really thrilled to talk about the last on-screen performance from a legacy actor slash musician like Miles Davis, and this movie does utilize a lot of Miles's talents, but also at the same time this movie just feels like it underutilizes a lot of the other elements that it's attempting to push to the audience. As I said previously, the pacing when you're talking about this movie is really slow in the beginning, but once it kind of catches its steam, the last, I will say, probably 50 minutes of this movie is an absolute joy. You really get to, by the time a lot of the pacing eventually picks up, you're already kind of in a groove with these characters that I feel like is really rare for other films. Other films don't quite capture what this film does in terms of pacing. I don't know, it's weird to talk about. Colin Friels, who plays John, does a really good job in this movie, and everyone around him does a subsequently good job, but Friels really commands the screen when he's on performance. Like, I feel like you really need that for a film like this. Like, the inspiration essentially lives, breathes, and dies with this protagonist that we follow throughout the course of the film, and I really enjoyed that. On the flip side, I will also say that Davis, for this being his final performance, because he actually, I believe, died either before the film came out or right around the time that the film was actually initially released. The film, for like the first 2 acts of this movie, anytime that he's on screen, is just a utilization of him playing trumpet, reminding us how amazing of a musician he was, and that, along with the rest of the soundtrack for this film, was amazing. I will say, though, I'm saying that as a fan of jazz. If you're not a fan of jazz, you are not going to like the movie. If you are bored by jazz or any amount of instrumental music, this is not the movie for you. How inspiring this movie is, it'll never, ever click with you. But once we eventually do end up meeting Davis as the actor and not just as a musician that is kind of like set up to be a weird cut transition, I don't know. I will say, though, he feels authentic. Like, his performance really does breathe really well. And that was something that I really admired about this movie. DVD doesn't come with a whole lot of special features. The transfer isn't that great. This movie is more than worth it, and I would recommend, if you're curious about this movie, or maybe you're happen to watch this and you grew up on this movie, you were lucky enough to see this as a kid, I would say that this movie is well worth the rental price and is well worth checking out. I'm actually going to give this one a 3 out of 5. I really liked this movie. I felt like the first half of this movie just kind of dragged a whole lot. It set up a lot of characters that I ultimately, by the end of this movie, didn't really end up caring about, because at the end of the day, I really care a lot about John's journey and not necessarily the journey of his wife or his kids or his best friends, because even the town around him. Said the soundtrack is really solid, performances are really grand, and the final piece of media that Davis was ever attached to, this movie succeeds on truly being a great, a good movie and an inspiring movie as well. And now it's time for our mental health moments. New to our content, mental health moment is where we take a theme of mental health from the movie at which we're reviewing and talk about it for just a few moments and hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. And I want to talk about John's character journey. Talk about John's character journey specifically because we've talked about this on the podcast, we've talked about this on this channel several times. You have to have a creative outlet. Having a creative outlet does wonders for your mental health. And it's really, honestly, it's satisfying. We've been doing this channel for a little over a year, and I can say that every time I get a comment, every time we see views, every time we get a new subscriber, it's really exhilarating and it's really rewarding in terms of mental health. Same deal goes with the podcast and the film festival and the other podcasts that we've done and our Patreon supporters, and that list just kind of goes on and on and on. It does wonders for our mental health, and it means that we're in the right direction to keep breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health. I want to encourage anyone that's not creating, whether you do it online or you're an artist in your local community, whether that's music, art, movies, what have you, continue to create. Continue to give yourself a mental health avenue to pursue your dreams, to pursue the things that you love, because at the end of the day, whether your job is great or your home situation is terrible or whatever the circumstances are surrounding outside of that creativity is going to help you get through stuff, and it has the power to get you through anything. Our journey throughout the course of the film is kind of a series of ups and downs for the first 2 acts of this movie, and it's the dream of being a trumpeter. I don't know if I said that right, and if I didn't, I'm sorry. It really keeps him pursuing, and it's the dream of just playing the trumpet and being the next Billy Cross that gives him the hope to hold on. And sometimes that's enough creativity to keep you here with us. So if you or someone you know needs any resources whatsoever, click the links in the descriptions below. Check out our mental health resource library. You guys can check out Dingo now. It's available on digital and DVD from Dark Star Pictures, and we'll be back later this week talking about make sure that you guys hit subscribe, because we have interviews coming out from our Horrific Hope event from this year all week, and we're also going to be talking about Bob's Burgers later in the week. We have a couple podcasts dropping, so make sure you guys don't miss a single moment. Have a great night, guys.